We appreciate you watching Breaking Strongholds and have the interest to watch this interview. I'm Calvin Pearson, and I play the role of Benjamin.
My name is John Chance, and I play Ryan James.
And the relationship that Benjamin and Ryan have in Breaking Strongholds is reflected in the real relationship that John and I have had for 8 years. That one of a, you want to call it mentor, mentee, two friends is really what it is. And so, John, do you remember how you and I got started in this relationship that we've had?
Yeah, you were a pastor at the church I went to. I was a student. I was a very active student. And you, at the time, were also mentoring two of my best friends. I was in the mentorship program as well, but I was bouncing around between 2 or 3 different guys. And I realized at one point I really didn't have one. And Garrett said, "Hey, do you want to sit in on Calvin and I's mentorship talk?" And I said, "Of course." And after I sat down once, you invited me to keep coming back.
Okay. And we met, if I remember right, we met on Wednesday nights, every Wednesday night. Was that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, every Wednesday night right before the Wednesday night student service.
That's right, because you went to the student service and I had my Bible study thing on Wednesday night, but we met for about an hour, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah.
John, what was going on in your life that made you want to have that relationship? What was going on there?
Yeah, I think outside of just me getting to spend extra time with some of my friends, at the time I was lacking a real strong male role model in my life. My dad wasn't living with us at the time, so it was just me, my mom, and my little brother, and sometimes my older brother, who was sort of in and out. And so most of my life I was surrounded by either people my age or people younger than me. And so I didn't really have a stronger male role model to look up to. And I think the mentorship program was originally designed for a situation like that. And so when I got the opportunity to meet with you, I kind of jumped at the chance of that, And as a result, of all these things going on, I was not in the greatest mental space. I was having some pretty dark thoughts. I was experiencing a lot of isolation and loneliness, and the chance to meet with someone and actually talk about that kind of stuff was completely novel to me.
Yeah, it was interesting to me. I remember when we would meet, sometimes I was kind of wondering what was going on in your life, because you were so sometimes very, very quiet, not all the time, but sometimes very, very quiet. And I remember just kind of wondering, okay, not seeing any major things, just more curious kind of thing. And almost sometimes I'd wonder, are you going to keep coming back to the meetings? But you did. I mean, all the time. If I remember right, there was also some crises at the high school with kids committing suicide and stuff like that. Is that, remembering that scenario correctly?
Yeah, you're remembering that correctly. At the time, we had a lot of people in the area called a string of student suicides that happened over the course of, I'd say, 7 or 8 months. As a result, we got used to having psychologists and therapists on campus with us that were free to use for any of the students. And we got used to being open and talking about that kind of stuff, I think, which is pretty interesting for a high school. A lot of kids in high school, the one that I went to, were very open about talking about that stuff because it was kind of, at the time, what was going on.
And so did our weekly meetings affect that part of you? Did that help with your struggles in that area? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, a lot of people looked at me, including, my mom and some of my teachers, and they would just say, he's very quiet. He likes being quiet. He enjoys being quiet. He's just a quiet kid. But in reality, I wasn't very quiet. I really liked talking. I mean, I was on stage every weekend and I was acting and I was doing all this different kind of creative stuff. I love talking and I love talking to people, and I was just itching to say what was on my mind, and I was itching to talk about the stuff that was bothering me. I just didn't really have anyone to do it with.
Okay, so when we would gather together, what made it easy for you to talk in that kind of setting?
I felt like I could trust you. You were a guy I had seen in church for a very long time. I had seen you preach. I had seen when you met with my best friends before, they would always talk about you. They would always talk about how cool you were and all the different Bibles you had and, all the different interests and woodworking and stuff. And when I sat down in that mentorship meeting for the first time with you, I felt like I already had known you for a very long time. And so that just small element of trust was enough to make me feel comfortable opening up.
What do you remember that we talked about when we met together? What are things that you remember?
I remember always talking about my insecurities. I remember talking about how I felt like I had a lot of failures and a lot of shortcomings. I remember talking about my home life. I remember talking about what was going on at school. And I remember talking about my discipline issues, my, fear of failing, and my apparent, I think, lack of ambition or my apathy.
Well, apparent lack of ambition, I really like that, because you have lots of ambition, but it didn't seem like it.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a curriculum necessarily, and you mentioned a host of different things we talked about. So it was just more spending time together and letting happen whatever happened as far as the conversation. Is that how you remember it being? At least that, in my mind, that's what we did.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when I walked into the meeting, I had no idea what we were going to talk about. And I had no idea how long we were going to talk about, like that specific thing. And so I think that was probably good, though, because that was the avenue. If I had something on my mind all week, then I could walk in and know that I could talk about that thing. And we weren't going to just be looped into this one, thing that we had to talk about for that week.
Our group, we met, but there was also two other guys, Garrett and Zach were there. How do you think their being in the group helped you and helped the group to accomplish things?
Yeah, I think that was a real big deal for me, because Garrett and Zach at the time, they were my best friends, and they still are some of my best friends, especially Garrett. I talk to Garrett every single day. Still, I was just texting him before I came over here. If I needed to talk to you about something one-on-one, I always had the method to do so. I could text you, I could call you, I could just show up to your house randomly, and we could talk about that thing one-on-one. But just having the opportunity to talk about those things with my two best friends present in the room was huge for me, because it taught me humility, and it, taught me how to be vulnerable around other guys.
And so their being there didn't hinder the relationship. In a sense, it helped it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, on the surface, it was a little bit more difficult to open up with those two around, because their opinion of me meant everything to me at the time. But eventually I realized just how much better, my male relationships were when we were vulnerable and honest about our feelings.
And yet we could also have the one-on-one time, which we did.
Yeah.
Not every week, but we did have time for the one-on-one stuff. So in thinking about, the folks who are watching, I'd just like to say to those of you who are thinking about being a mentor, just two things that I want to encourage you in. One is intentionality. I was very intentional in meeting with these young men. I made it a point to set aside the time, and it was a sacrifice. I was just about to teach a Wednesday night Bible study, and I met with them before that, and it was a sacrifice because I wanted to be thinking about my class and such like that, but this was the best time. So I set that time aside very intentionally, and I sought these guys out. If they weren't there, I texted them, "Where were you? What's going on?" Not in a rude kind of way, but just, "Hey, I want to stay in touch." So intentionality in being a mentor. The other one is availability. Just be available to them. And if they text you during the week, and text them back quickly. But be available. So being intentional and being available. And here's what is, I want to be sure you grasp this. This was God's work. It wasn't my work. It wasn't like I said, "John, I'm going to help you. I know how to do that." No, it was, "God, you want me to meet with young men? Okay, I'll do that." And God did some miraculous things that I didn't know he was doing. I had no idea how down John really was. And so be available for God's Spirit to work through you and in you, and often in spite of you. And he will. And he does incredible things. So though this relationship, we've talked a lot about how we did it and what we did. please understand God's Spirit was all over this thing. Sometimes I knew it was God's Spirit. Sometimes I wasn't aware of it, but He was always there. So, John, what are some things, if there's someone watching that needs a mentor, how do you find one?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things. First is to understand yourself, how big of a role being a mentor actually is, and then finding someone who also understands that, and they understand the responsibility and the weight of mentoring someone. You really can't just grab anyone that you find, any guy or girl that you find that you think is cool. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready or even willing to be your mentor. At the same time, you also want to find someone with traits that you admire and you want to see in yourself. For me, when I looked at Calvin, I had always admired his dedication to his craft and his discipline. He also always seemed like he was doing something. He was always helping someone. He always had an event scheduled. He was always working on a hobby. And for a kid that just kind of laid around the house most of the day, that was really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be busy. And so Calvin seemed like the obvious choice for me to pursue as a mentor. So I think with those two things, also consider having common ground some way. For me and Calvin, it was he already knew my two best friends, as well as the fact that I enjoyed acting and he also enjoyed acting. So you want to make sure that you also could picture yourself just being friends with the person that you want to be your mentor. I would say among those three things, just keep in mind that it is a big responsibility for that person.
And another element there, John, that certainly you alluded to is that trust element. Mm-hmm. And that takes time to build that trust.
Yeah.
And for 4 years when you were in high school, we met every week, and that level of trust kept growing both ways here. You trusting me and me trusting you. And really, John and I are just friends. I mean, mentor, mentee, we're just good friends in the Lord, and remain good friends to this day. In fact, we're going to go have lunch right after we get done with the interview, and we would do that anyway. So I guess what I'm saying is just be friends with somebody and trust the Father to do amazing things, because He does. Anything else, John?
I think that's it.
Okay. Hope you enjoy watching Breaking Strongholds. We've had a ball doing it together. It's been a kick. So thank you for letting us be a part of your world.